Hey folks, so doing an i5-13400 400F review. Now I've had the i5-13400F for about a month now. You can see my unboxing, you see benchmarks, you see some gaming videos with it. And I gotta say, I was excited about getting the CPU, but after using it for a while, I'm just like, yeah, it's just all right. Well, why is that? Yours truly, slightly spoiled, right? We have had I9-13900kf. We've had the I9-12900kf, just a ton of, CPUs, i7-13700K and the i5-13600kf. All of those, would be superior to this CPU. But that's not really what we need to talk about is Dave Noble's happiness, right? We want to talk about whether this is a, really good deal. And a lot of people, kind of consider this the value king. I personally thought that with the i5-12400 and 400F, not as much about this i5-13400F. So we'll talk about that. All right, so how does this CPU stack up against other Intel 12th and 13th gen? And notice, I'll tell you, I'm a big Intel guy. Not really going to talk too much AMD in this video. There is some discussion later about AMD, but I just, being a smaller channel, I can't afford to run all of the AMD CPUs and Intel, so we pretty much just stay on the Intel side. All right, so looking at this, at the very top of the list, the best score that I've had, and these are all scores that yours truly has gotten on his equipment, okay? i9-13900kf, that scored 40,114, all right? That is by far my best CPU, and I've done a little better with, overclocking of that, but that's what I have. The very bottom, the Cellphone G6900, right? The world's fastest Celeron, and that score was 2287. So, not necessarily in the middle of the pack, but somewhere close to the middle, we have the two i5-13400Fs that I did. And we'll talk a bit about these more in a second, but you see the two scores that I had using a Gigabyte B760M DS3H motherboard. So let's go ahead and, talk about some other stuff on here. What's surrounding this? You got the i5-12600K, slightly better score. Just below it, the i7-12700F, which, is coming in probably a bit more pricey. A little higher up, but quite a bit of separation, the i9-12900. And we don't have, I didn't do the i7-13700. It would be, I believe it's way over here somewhere. And then the i9-13900F is way up here, right? So all those you're probably not even considering. Other ones that, would be slightly higher, the i5-13500, the i5-12600 would be, slightly less than this, right? Somewhere between these two. But that's kind of how it stacks up for multi-core. Now, I didn't run single core for all this, so we can't, necessarily judge that aspect. All right. So one thing about this CPU, folks, it does respond to a better CPU cooler. Now, throwing a massive Knock2 a D14 at a Celeron G6900 is not really going to do a whole lot. Throwing that at this CPU is not really going to do a whole lot. But spending $20, may be worth it in some aspects. You can see, and I say $20, that's how much the VETROO V5 costs. Well, actually, somebody from VETROO sent it to me for free, but back in the day, it was $20. Then eventually they sent me the LGA 1700 kit. So I'm running that as an example. There are lots of other CPU coolers out there in the $20 range. A lot of them I've had on this channel that could actually exceed the performance of what the VETROO V5. And I'm talking Thermalright. I'm talking ID cooling. There's no reason to spend $60, $70 on something from Knock2 like an NHU12S or a NHU14 or one of those, right? So, but let's talk about this. So, stock cooler is listed here, VETROO V5, and these are 3 benchmarks with temp and score. So we have XTU, R20, and R23. These are Cinebench. This is Intel's XTU, okay? These are the 3 benchmarks I commonly run. I'm sure there are a lot of other benchmarks people would prefer that I run, but you know, this is what I've been running. So now, running the XTU benchmark, stock cooler, 69 degrees Celsius, VETROO V5, that's a difference of 14 degrees Celsius. The score, you know, went up 135 using the better cooler. Cinebench R20, which, you know, definitely runs hotter than XTU, got up to 79 degrees Celsius, where the VETROO V5 kept it down at 60, difference of 19 degrees Celsius. That score was significant. This is the biggest one, difference-wise, I would say, is 526 points improvement just by having the V5 in there. Cinebench R23 temp, once again, 79 degrees Celsius, and the VETROO V5 hit 61 this time. Difference 18 degrees Celsius. And the R23 score, you know, only slightly better at 188. Now, of course, I could have run these like 10 times and we could have got, you know, taken the averages. And maybe, you know, the differences would not have been as great, or maybe they would have averaged out greater. But I can tell you that, you know, better CPU cooler does make a difference. And this is, you know, some proof of that, right? All right. Now, a lot of you don't like user benchmark. I can't say I'm a big fan either, especially when you read the comments that they have. They're real negative on AMD. But from the aspect of ranking CPUs, I think that aspect is pretty accurate. So what I have here, folks, screenshots from their page. I5-13400, you see the score there, or excuse me, the price there that they show, $227. I5-12600kf, $210, and then the I5-12600. There's a lot of other options out there. I5-13500, $13600, $13600K. These are just a few that I brought in. But you can see where they show them as ranking, all right? So we'll talk more about this one, but you can see it is higher ranked. And then this one, the 12600, is lesser ranked, which also means the 12400, 12500 are, you know, less than that. So I wanted out of that group to at least find the locked CPU that would be closest in score. So you see over here, one thing that usually means better gaming is this single core score, at least for the games that I do. This one's actually ranked a little higher than this, but then the i5-12600K is significantly more. And if we had the i5-13600KF or the, you know, the i9-13900kf, you'd see an even bigger score here, right? But their rankings, you know, I would say these are probably a little more similar than that shows. And then workstation-wise, you know, this is obviously the superior CPU, right? So enough about that. Pricing comparison. Of course, I could have used Newegg. I could have used Best Buy. I could have used a lot of other sites. You know, I think internationally, there are more people that have access to Amazon than they do Newegg, right? When I was in Bahrain, I couldn't even look at Newegg, if I remember correctly, but I could look at Amazon, and I was able to buy stuff on there. So pricing comparison wise, you know, I guess it was last year, the i5-12400 came out, right? Yeah, it was last year at some point. $182. You know, and this was a bit more than 11400, the 10400. Obviously, Intel keeps raising their prices. Significant difference between this though and the 13th gen i5-13400. That's what, $57. Is it worth that? Well, it's definitely an improvement in performance. I'm not sure it's worth you know, the $57 though. i5-13600kf just on here for reference, significantly more. The performance of this though, folks, is definitely much greater than this one. All right. And if you have that extra $57, you may want to consider it. i5-12600K, we've already talked about that. That is superior for gaming. In most instances, there, you know, if you do enough research out there, and I did a bunch for this video, you will find there are a lot of games out there that the 12600K KF are, you know, significantly better. But then, boom, there will be i5-13400 scores that are higher. So I am basically saying the majority of games with the 12600K are greater than the 13400. All right. So don't make that mistake that I said, oh, all games, because it's more like the majority. Now, the i5-13400F, you see that score 209, significantly better price than this, right? What do you lose though? You don't have integrated graphics here. So what does that mean? Well, if you can't afford a graphics card, you're not going to see anything on your screen. All right. This is also, this guy is much better for troubleshooting. Sometimes that extra $30 is worth the money, because if something's not working on the screen, you can, you know, take your GPU, disconnect it, plug into the motherboard HDMI, and hopefully, you know, see the BIOS, see Windows, whatever. 12400F is on here. So, you know, $45 price difference between these two. 12600KF. So look at this price, folks, and that one, okay? $4 difference. We'll talk more about that. And then the 13600K way up there. What is not shown on here? That'd be another consideration. Actually, the pricing's too high. The i7-13700, the pricing is way out of there right now. All right, moving on, folks. Other alternatives, all right? So kind of looked at these a little bit. i5, 12400, 500, 600. Slower will work in all cheaper 600 series and 700 series motherboards. So that's another thing to consider, folks, is when you are looking at motherboards, how much more is that 700 series motherboard going to cost you if you go 13th gen? Now, 13th gen works in 600 series motherboards, but you got to be able to update the BIOS, okay? So depending on the motherboard you pick, you may have an easy way to update that BIOS, or at least it looks like it is. And then there are other ones that you have to have a 12th gen to update. Now, in the future, you know, if you're watching this in 2024, you know, pretty much every new motherboard is going to ship with an updated BIOS that will support 12th and 13th gen. But right now, there's a lot of old stock out there still, and, you know, people have those issues putting 13th gen on a 600 series. Now, you could buy one of my used motherboards off eBay. I usually put on there, you know, hey, this is 13th gen compatible, because guess what? I updated the BIOS is one of the things I do on here. But yeah, don't forget about factoring in the price of a motherboard, folks. i5-13500 and the 600, these are faster, right? But they're definitely more expensive. And like the 13500 seems hard to get, where the 600 is available, but it's, you know, it is as expensive as the i5-13600kf. I put K on here, but that's about where that price falls. Now, I mentioned I wasn't really going to talk about Ryzen 5 or what the AMD equivalents are, but Ryzen 5 7600KX, majority of benchmarks reviewed, it will perform better, slightly more money, right? So you will find some places where the i5-13400F is better, but for the most part, the 7600X is better. You know, before, one of the reasons I didn't buy this, the motherboards that came out originally for that were way too pricey. and kind of like, you know, buying 600 series or 700 series motherboards where they were, you know, overpriced in my opinion. And so, you know, now though, maybe not the story. You can buy cheaper motherboards with them, but they still ain't cheap enough that I'm going to go buy a bunch of Ryzens. All right. Maybe the next generation, the channel will have enough money that we'll be able to purchase, you know, more CPUs, right? All right, gaming. Let's get into that. So this isn't going to be all that extensive, folks. And I will tell you, you know, I did do some research. I looked at a lot of other channels, benchmarks. Usually I don't have time for that, but since I no longer have my other CPUs to compare to, I had to go and look at other people's stuff. So now what do we have? Well, here is a Fortnite video. You know, if you watch this channel, you see majority of the gaming videos are Fortnite on here. This is the i5-13400F. I combine it with the RTX 3090. Not really a good combination. And, you know, who's going to, with that graphics card, who's really going to run 1440p performance low? But I did, all right? I admit it, I did. Finished first place. You know, I do that quite a bit. But the fact is that... you know, this doesn't really tell you that much about how the gaming was with this. Yeah, you can see the FPS average. We can see utilization. This isn't, you know, these numbers aren't really great. We can see how much power the GPU used, but we don't see the CPU power. Now, I think if you do watch this video, you may see me show you XTU's TDP, core TDP, so you get an idea. And I do show you the average temps, if I remember correctly. So, you know, not a whole lot of great info here. The FPS average, this is a great gaming rig, right? But when you look at these numbers, it makes you wonder, will there be places where there will be CPU bottlenecking because the graphics card is way too good for this, right? So ideally, you would combine this CPU with something like a 3050, RTX 3050, and RTX 3060. You know, and beyond that, I don't think it's necessarily that great of a match. Now, AMD-wise, you got the RX 6600, 6600 XT, 6650 XT. That's probably, you know, the extent of what would match up good with those. All right. Now, in comparison, I didn't finish first here, but I had a ridiculously high FPS average, all right? 599. What was this with? Well, this was with my i9-13900kf. Now, is this that much better? Is it 150? Or excuse me, is it 250? Yeah, it's 250 difference. Is it 250 FPS difference? No, this is just one example. And if you play Fortnite enough, and one day I'm going to do this. I'm going to play 10 games with the same setup and show you every FPS average I had. The problem is, you know, finishing all the way to the end, so they're similar, right? You want to have a game that's about 15 to 19 minutes each time to compare. And if you can do that, then you know, at least for testing measurement purposes, you've got good data to work with, right? If I play a game for 7 minutes and I get no kills and, you know, I get shot in the back right off the bat, that doesn't really show me, you know, the same stats as if I finished first and I had, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10 kills, right? So in this case, there were 2 kills here. What did I get in my first place game? That doesn't even show you. Dang it. I took the screenshot too soon. Too late. But I guarantee I had at least 7 kills in that game, right? So, but yeah, not a good comparison. But the truth is the i9-13900kf is definitely superior in every way for gaming. And it's not even something most of you are going to compare, but I threw it in here. Now, what is more realistic, okay? Here was a video I tried to make that turned out to be total disappointment. And I honestly can't tell you why this didn't work out so great. But we have the i3-13100F versus the i3-12100F versus the i5-13400F. I provide some FPS, temps, power using stock cooler. Now I crossed out that Gigabyte B760M DS3H. I think that was the root of my problem with this video, the video I'd made based on these numbers. I want to one day come back and either do Z690 or a quality B660 motherboard. Graphics card used was the RTX 2060. Probably another good GPU to combine with the i5-13400F. RAM used two different kinds at two different speeds. All right, so that's what that shows. Now, World War Z. So this was an odd thing. You're talking two CPUs on this list that are superior to the i3-12100F. Yet, the best FPS I could get out of the i3-13100F was 80, where the 12100F, at two different runs with two different RAM speeds, 92. I tried this 3 times with the 13400F, and I did not match the 12100F. Okay, so you see, this goes across the top, folks. 91, and this is using World War Z's benchmark. Maybe it's bugged, but yeah, did not compete. You see the average temps here with the stock cooler. You know why this one ran hot? This is actually using the Intel thermal paste, so we could put a little note there. And these all have better thermal paste, but still. Max temp. So that was the average temp, max temp. You can see there, a bit higher, obviously, than the average. And then max power. 13100F used more power. Go figure, right? So another example, and this is where this whole thing kind of came to a big old crash. Fortnite benchmark 1440p competitive DX12 using replay mode in Fortnite, okay? Fourth place, 6 kills. You see once again the CPUs. And what else do you see? The amount of RAM and the speed of the RAM, okay? So we have here 3600 megahertz, 32 gigs, 3000 megahertz. This is DDR4. 16 gigs at 4000. And then over here with the i5-13400, 16 gigs, 4000 megahertz, 32 gigs at 3600. FPS average, 194, 194. Whoa, what's up here, folks? Why did that not work? And then, oh, gee, it didn't like this RAM crash. This thing kept crashing with this RAM. But this RAM worked fine with the 13100F. And it worked fine running at a lower speed, all right? Just so you know. Ran fine with the 12100F at a lower speed, I should say. See CPU utilization, average temp, max temp, and then the power usage. What does this tell you? It's inconclusive, really, but I think it had something to do with the motherboard. One thing else I did, folks, is I updated the BIOS, and that still did not help. Sometimes that can help with performance. And if I were to look up this motherboard now, potentially there would be another update. And at some point you would hope the 13400F would outperform, right? But right now, I might as well have a 13100. All right, so let's close this video up. What's my recommendation, folks? Well, I, am blessed, right? I have all these CPUs. And I've had a lot more, but we, personally, I'm going to pass on the CPU. I would tell you get the i5-12600K. Put it in a 600 series motherboard. Don't buy the i5-13400 and put it in a 700 series motherboard. The 12600, and then if you want to say 12600kf in here, it's going to give you better benchmarks, similar gaming FPS. Some games the i5-13400F is better. Some games the i5-12600K is better. Similar pricing. Motherboards, it's going to work right out of the box. B660, H670, Z690, B760, Z790. So you have a lot of options. 600 series motherboards are much cheaper and definitely on eBay even more. And then, like I said, CPU compatible with all without BIOS updates. But yeah, hard pass on 13400. Hey, thanks for checking out my video. Please like, please subscribe. Thank you.